Indiana Jones, a man whose very name itself has become synonymous with globe-trotting adventure. Like many Western children, one of my first introductions to Hinduism was with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. It is no secret that the entire series is heavily inspired by adventure movies from the early days of cinema. These movies would have dashing male heroes, remarkable treasures, and of course exotic locales. The movie Gunga Din was a very clear influence in the making of the Temple of Doom. In fact, many scenes from Temple of Doom are even taken directly from Gunga Din. The main antagonists of both movies are the Thuggee cult, an actual historic group whose more accurate portrayal comes from Gunga Din.
There's been none of this for 50 years.
Thuggee. That's what it is, Mitchell.
What's Thuggee, sir?
A murder cult. Colonel Sleeman crushed 50 years ago.
The Thugs were the most fiendish band of killers that ever existed.
There were at least 10,000 of them in India, and they murdered 30,000 people a year. Thuggee was practiced from the Himalayas to Ceylon. The order was religious and worshipped Kali, the goddess of blood.
The Thugs were stranglers, weren't they, sir?
Stranglers. They dug the graves of their victims in advance.
In Gunga Din, the portrayal of the thugs was heavily influenced by the way the British perceived them from the 1830s onwards. In the British mind, the thugs were crazed religious fanatics who expressly went out of their way to sacrifice people to Kali, the goddess of destruction, not blood as stated in Gunga Din. They would do this by ritually strangling them. The thugs from Indiana Jones were exaggerated to the point where their only recognizable quality was their devotion to Kali. The concept of the thugs traveling was dropped, and even the method of murder was changed for perhaps the most memorable scene in the movie, where a man's heart was ripped out and he is lowered, somehow still living, into a pit of lava. A brief homage was paid to the historical thugs, however, when an assassin was sent to strangle Indiana Jones. Interestingly, the goal of both groups of thugs was ultimately the same, as they intend to have Hindus conquer and rule India.
The British in India will be slaughtered. Then we will overrun the Muslims. Then the Hebrew God will fall. And then the Christian God will be cast down and forgotten.
You're mad.
Mad? Mad. Hannibal was mad. Caesar was mad. And Napoleon surely was the maddest of the lot. Ever since time began, they've called mad all the great soldiers in this world. Mad? We shall see what wisdom lies within my madness. But this is but the spring freshet that precedes the flood. From here we roll on, from village to town, from town to mighty city, ever mounting, ever widening, until at last my wave engulfs all India.
In reality, the thugs were semi-organized groups of roving bandits, focused as much on the accumulation of wealth looted from the victims they slaughtered as they were on the worship of Kali. One of the main goals of the thugs was simple robbery, and while it was said they would murder for small pickings, they would more often choose targets who were wealthy and affluent. Their numbers were composed of many castes and in fact multiple religions, often having Muslim members along with Hindus. The Muslims rationalized this worship of another deity, a sin in Islam, by thinking Kali was in fact a servant of Allah, with some believing that she was Muhammad's daughter. It is also noteworthy that while they followed Kali, the thugs were no more religious than the average Indian of the time. The way the thugs operated was that they would go out on expeditions, generally starting after the autumn harvest, around October, and returning before the rainy season, around June. The thugs would meet caravans, join them, and gain their trust. If the thugs were in large groups, too intimidating to just join the passing caravan, they would split up and pretend not to know each other until eventually they outnumbered the victims. At the opportune moment, when the unsuspecting party had lowered their guard, they would strike and kill the men of the caravan. This would often happen at night, in an enclosed area to prevent escape. The thugs would spare women and children. The women would be married off to a member of the group, while the children would be raised by thug families. The thugs did not exclusively use handkerchiefs to strangle their victims. It was just their weapon of choice. And should they have to resort to more conventional weapons with more suspicious folk, they would. It is estimated that the thugs killed over 1 million people, though accounts of the thugs' activities are very sparse and their accuracy is dubious. While Gunga Din successfully portrays the British stereotype for the Thuggee cult, it is far from factual. It managed to get more factually correct than Indiana Jones, but one should not be surprised by that. Indiana Jones presents a stereotypical murder cult with little relation to the historical thugs. They are both very enjoyable movies in spite of this, and are recommended watching for those with interest in adventure movies. Perhaps the most realistic portrayal of the thugs in Hollywood is from the 1988 movie The Deceivers. In this film, a young British officer, played by Pierce Brosnan, discovers the thugs and goes undercover as a member to learn their ways and destroy them from the inside. The main character in this story is loosely based on William Sleeman, the man ultimately responsible for destroying the thugs in the 1830s. While the story is entirely fictional, it has perhaps the best cinematic portrayal of what Thuggee life may have been like.